Charles's face turned gray before the dessert tray hit the table. His hand shot out to grip the back of the chair beside him, and for a split second, he just stood there, swaying, blinking, lips parted like he couldn't form the words. Then he stumbled forward, nearly tripping over Margot's perfectly folded linen rug, and disappeared down the hallway, coughing violently. I didn't follow. I already knew what was happening, and I knew exactly who it was meant for. If you've ever had to sit through a family dinner where every smile felt loaded, stay close. Subscribe to Revenge with Seren, because sometimes the most powerful revenge is done quietly, with no one watching but the one person who always thought you'd stay silent. We were halfway through Thanksgiving dinner at my in-laws' home in Glen Ridge, New Jersey, the kind of house where the wine is always too expensive for what it tastes like, and the seating arrangement never feels accidental. I was placed directly between the hallway and the window, just enough out of Margot's line of conversation to remind me where I stood. Adrian, my husband, was across from me, nodding politely at his brother's story about investment portfolios, while Margot sat at the head of the table like she was hosting royalty instead of her two sons and their wives. That's when she offered me the sangria. She walked into the room holding a silver tray, every glass identical except for two, which had been set just slightly apart. She picked one up, turned toward me and said, "For my favorite daughter-in-law," with that smile she wore when she wanted the world to think we had a relationship. The smile didn't reach her eyes. I accepted the glass, thanked her quietly, and glanced down. Something about it felt off. There was a slight shimmer beneath the surface of the cranberry-colored liquid, just faint enough to make me question if I was imagining it. She turned away to serve the others, and that's when I did it. Charles's glass sat untouched beside his plate. He was busy adjusting the cuff of his sleeve and answering a question about interest rates. I placed my glass in front of him and moved his to where mine had been. No one noticed, not even Adrian, whose eyes briefly met mine but said nothing. Charles drank from the glass not 2 minutes later. I saw it happen. Saw the way he paused mid-sentence, rubbed the side of his neck, blinked like the lights had gotten too bright. 5 minutes after that, he excused himself. 10 minutes after that, we heard him vomiting down the hall. "My name is Grace. I'm 33. I run a floral design business that specializes in small weddings and memorials, and I've been married to Adrian for 5 years. We met at a wedding, actually. He was doing lighting for a last-minute backyard ceremony, and I was trying to keep a bridal arch from collapsing in a windstorm. We built something solid together. It's not flashy. It's not what my in-laws wanted for their son. But it's real. And it's mine. Margot never liked me. Not once. She never said it outright, but she didn't have to. It was in the way she introduced me to her friends as the girl who does flowers, the way she asked Adrian if I'd considered going back to school now that the business has had its little run, the way she insisted on hosting every major holiday so that I would always feel like a guest in their version of our life. What happened at dinner wasn't an accident. It wasn't indigestion. It wasn't bad shellfish or too much wine. It was deliberate. I saw the way she looked at me when Charles started to get sick, just a flicker of surprise, the moment she realized something had gone wrong. Her hand froze on her wine glass. Her gaze darted down the table toward the glass that had once been mine, then up to me. I didn't say a word. Neither did she. Adrian got up to help his father. Ray, my sister-in-law, followed with concern, holding her son on one hip. Margot stayed seated, calmly placing her napkin in her lap as if nothing had happened. "He's sensitive to wine sometimes," she murmured, even though he'd had that same sangria a dozen times before without so much as a yawn. Her voice didn't shake. Her smile never dropped. But I knew. And so did she. It's strange, the moment you realize someone wants you gone, not with shouting or slamming doors, but with something quiet and calculated, something slipped into a drink, something no one would ever think to question. Margot didn't need me to disappear, she just needed me to seem unstable, to miss one important event, to not be believed, to look unreliable. She always played the long game. But this time so did I. Margot looked at me again, just once before Ray came back into the dining room and said Charles was resting, a little pale but doing better. The noise picked up again. Conversations resumed. The baby laughed. Adrian sat back down and squeezed my hand under the table like he always did, thinking I might be overwhelmed by the evening. I smiled gently. I didn't tell him what I knew. Not yet. Because sometimes the only thing more powerful than speaking up is waiting until they realize you didn't have to. Have you ever sat through dinner knowing you weren't really welcome and smiled anyway? Tell me in the comments. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who never has to raise their voice. The text came at 6:43 a.m. sharp.
Hope Charles is feeling better today. He really must have reacted to something. Let's not make a fuss. These things happen. Love you. That was it. No mention of the wine Margot had pressed into my hand. No check-in about me. Just that last line, let's not make a fuss, as if she were brushing lint from a cashmere coat. Margot didn't erase events. She reframed them before anyone else could get a word in. I read the message twice before setting the phone back down, screen face down. Adrian was in the kitchen, watering plants like it mattered more than breathing. We barely spoke. He refolded the guest towels, started laundry that wasn't even full. I stood in the hallway watching him rearrange the same stack of mail twice, waiting for him to break the silence. He didn't. It wasn't until lunch that he finally said, "Dad's better, just resting." "Good," I said flatly. But I could see it. Adrian didn't believe it either. He looked like someone trying to reason with a ghost. That evening, he surprised me. He asked if we could skip Sunday dinner. He had never done that before. "Just this once," he said, without offering a reason. I didn't need one. "All right," I told him, watching something shift in his shoulders, a tension uncoiling. Not relief, not yet, but space, just enough to breathe differently. Margot had never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Her control was clean, embedded in polite expectations and friendly reminders. Adrian, being the eldest, had carried her vision the longest, showing up, agreeing quietly, trying not to disrupt the performance she called family. But now, cracks were showing. That week, I started noticing what had always been there and realizing I had trained myself not to flinch. The compliments she gave in front of her bridge club friends. "Grace manages weddings. Impressive, especially without a degree." The emails to Adrian with job listings. "Just in case Grace's shop ever slows down, it's good to plan." The invitations to events she knew I couldn't attend, followed by long-winded updates to remind me what I had missed. It wasn't open hostility. It was corrosion, meant to soften your edges until you didn't fight back. On Thursday, Ray called. No greeting, no warm-up. "She's blaming you?" I stiffened. "Excuse me?" "She told Eli that maybe Charles got sick because of something you brought. She didn't outright say it, but she said it twice. That's her thing. Make a whisper feel like memory." My stomach dropped. "She's implying I poisoned her husband." "She's saying you brought something unusual for dinner and that you looked pale, like maybe you were off." I sat down hard in the kitchen chair. This wasn't just gaslighting. This was a slow, public dismantling of credibility. "She wants to frame me as fragile," I muttered. "Unstable? The dramatic one." "That's the playbook," Ray said. "She tried it on me when I postponed the baby shower. Said I was too emotional for long-term planning." I remembered that. I had cried for hours, thinking I let everyone down. And now? It wasn't guilt. It was design. That night I found Adrian sitting at his desk, scrolling through old photos of weddings we'd worked on together. The one on his screen was a lakeside ceremony, dusty blue linens, clean florals, twilight lighting, one of my favorites. He wasn't smiling. "You okay?" I asked. He stared a second too long before answering. "She's trying to break us, without saying a word." He turned to me. "Do you believe that?" "I do now," I said. "She doesn't want me to leave. She wants me to crack, quietly, in front of everyone." He didn't argue. Instead, he whispered something that stunned me more than anger ever could. "I think she's done it before." I froze. "To who?" He looked away. "I don't know, but I think Thanksgiving was just the first time it didn't go as planned." The next day, Margot sent me a text. "Charles is back to himself. Must have been that cranberry dressing. Some folks react oddly to tart flavors. Hope you're getting rest. You looked exhausted." I read it 5 times. There was no concern, just curation. She didn't want to check in. She wanted me contained. On Saturday, she followed it up with a photo of a wreath. "Made this in your honor. Your shop always inspires me. Just us girls." I could almost hear her voice, syrupy and smug. By the time Adrian said he needed to go check on his dad, I simply nodded. "Do you want me to come with you?" I asked. He hesitated. "Not this time. I want to see how she acts when I'm alone." I understood. He didn't want her to see us aligned. While he was gone, I found a photo in a drawer I hadn't opened in months, our engagement brunch. Ray was mid-laugh. I looked stiff. Margot stood behind me, one manicured hand on my shoulder, her smile perfect, her eyes locked on the camera. The back was signed in her script, "A promising start, M." The ink was rushed, slightly smudged. She had wanted that message out before the moment dried. That photo wasn't for memory. It was a blueprint. It was a warning. Have you ever been gaslit so gently it felt like concern? Leave a comment if you've learned the difference, because sometimes just checking in means I'm rewriting your truth.
It was never about catching him in a lie. I didn't go looking for anything that night. Not really. I was just trying to find a pair of earbuds Adrian always left in the second drawer of his desk. But as I reached past a stack of old receipts and a charging cable, my hand brushed something stiffer than paper. A folder, navy blue, tucked neatly beneath a manila envelope of wedding vendor contacts and last year's tax forms. I pulled it out slowly, hesitating for a second before flipping it open. And there it was, a toxicology report. My name wasn't on it, but I didn't have to see my name to know who it was meant for. The report was dated the day after Thanksgiving. Sample tested, red liquid. Analysis, presence of benzodiazepines. Enough to sedate an adult male within 30 minutes. Nothing fatal, but enough to cloud memory, disorient, humiliate. My mouth went dry. My first instinct wasn't rage or fear, it was disbelief. Not at Margot. No, at Adrian. Because he had tested the glass, he had kept it, he had ordered a report without telling me, and I hadn't even noticed. I sat down at his desk and stared at the paper for what felt like an hour. I wasn't angry at him, not exactly. I was something heavier. The kind of hurt that doesn't make you yell. It makes you question the shape of your marriage. Not because of what he did, but because of what he didn't feel safe enough to say. When Adrian came home from his parents' house, I was already in bed, facing the wall. He asked if I was awake. I said no, and I didn't speak to him again until morning. The next day passed like we were housemates. He made eggs. I folded laundry. We each had headphones in by 3 p.m. Around dinner time, I finally asked him, "Did you find what you needed at your parents'?" He nodded. "Charles is fine." "Did you talk to her?" "No." He looked at me for a long second, then added, "She pretended everything was normal." I wanted to tell him I'd found the report, but I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to understand why he hadn't told me first. So instead, I told Ray. We met at a coffee shop 2 towns over, halfway between errands, so it looked like neither of us had time for drama. I handed her the report and watched her eyes move across the page. "She really did it," Ray said softly. "I mean, we knew, but now, this is proof." I nodded. "And Adrian didn't tell me." "She probably told him not to." "What do you mean?" Ray lowered her voice. "This is what she does. She isolates, not just you from them, but you from each other. She'll convince him it's better not to worry you, better to handle it on his own, better to stay quiet until it's over. But the truth is, she wants to break your alignment." I felt my stomach turn. Because Ray was right. Margot didn't need to destroy my marriage directly. She just had to create enough fog between us that we stopped seeing each other clearly. That evening, I sat across from Adrian in the living room. We were both reading, or pretending to. I closed my book and looked at him. "I found the report," I said. He set his mug down, slowly. "I was going to tell you." "When?" "I don't know. I was waiting for the right time." "There isn't a right time to tell your wife her mother drugged her. You just say it." He looked tired but not defensive. That made it worse. I wanted to be angry, but all I felt was distance. He rubbed his hands together, then said, "I didn't want to make you choose." "Between you and her?" "Number. Between what you remember and what's real." I took a breath. "Why didn't you just trust me with the truth?" "Because I've seen how she twists things, and I wasn't sure if you were ready to see it." His voice cracked slightly on that last sentence, and that's when I realized it wasn't that he didn't trust me. He didn't want to hurt me. And somehow, that had hurt even more. Over the next few days, something shifted between us. Not broken, but exposed. Like the topsoil after a storm, raw and wet and waiting to settle again. Adrian started sharing more without prompting. Little things, like how he'd taken the glass from the table when no one was watching, how he'd driven straight to Jason, a lab contact from a documentary shoot years ago, how he'd waited 3 sleepless nights for the results. "I needed to know I wasn't imagining it," he said. "I needed to be sure before I put that kind of stain on your family." I told him I understood, and I did. But something still sat heavy in my chest, because he shouldn't have had to carry it alone. Not in a marriage like ours. That weekend, we visited Ray and Eli for dinner. After the kids went to bed, Ray pulled out a tablet and opened a folder labeled Archive Ashby. She'd been combing through old holiday videos, trying to find something, anything, that could serve as context for the report. She found it. Thanksgiving 2 years ago. Margot, in the kitchen, pouring wine. A second later, she discreetly slips a small bottle into her apron pocket. Same apron, same tray, same glass style, same pause when Adrian walks in unexpectedly. It wasn't the same event, but it was the same playbook. Ray looked at me. "How many times do you think she's done this?" I shook my head. "I don't know. But now I don't think Thanksgiving was her first time. I think it was the first time it went wrong." Back at home, I found an old voicemail from Margot. One I'd saved months ago and forgotten about. Her voice, soft and cool. "Just wanted to remind you, when things get busy, it's easy to forget what really matters. Don't let your marriage distract you from your potential, sweetheart." I used to think that was advice. Now I understood it was strategy. Manipulate the definition of love. Reshape loyalty. Recast concern as control. These weren't just toxic in-laws. They were practiced architects of doubt. We were doing dishes when I asked, Nothing about the moment was dramatic. Adrian was drying the last wine glass, and I was putting leftovers into containers. Our movements were quiet, familiar, but my voice, when I finally broke the silence, came out low and steady. "What else haven't you told me?" He looked up slowly, not startled, not defensive, just tired. "You saw the report," he said. "I did," I replied, "but that's not what I'm asking." He placed the towel on the counter and leaned back against the sink. For a long second he didn't speak. Then he said, "I've been collecting things, quietly, things your mom wouldn't think twice about saying or doing. Notes, videos, voicemails, screenshots." I froze. "Since when?" "Since last fall," he answered, "right around the time she told you Ray was too emotional to co-host the baby shower." I remembered that day. I had come home in tears because Ray had canceled last minute, and Margot had suggested, in that special tone of hers, that maybe Ray wasn't emotionally stable enough for long-term hosting. I hadn't thought anything of it then, but Adrian had. He led me into his office and opened a folder labeled simply Ashby. Inside were subfolders by date. In them, screen recordings of texts, voice memos Margot had left when she didn't realize Adrian had voicemail autosave, one video from a family brunch where Margot introduced me as Grace the florist. For now. The laughter afterward wasn't malicious. It was worse. It was casual. "I wasn't planning to use this," Adrian said. "I kept hoping things would shift, that if we were just good enough, she'd stop trying to dismantle you." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked again. "Because this was never meant to be my battle," he said. "But then Thanksgiving happened, and it stopped being about strategy, it became about safety." That was when he pulled out the flash drive. "I didn't want you to see this until you were ready." He handed it to me like it was something breakable. The label read only one word: Vanessa. Ray's real name was Vanessa Ray Ellis, something I had forgotten until that moment. She had married Eli 3 years before I did. Soft-spoken, sharp-eyed, always a few steps ahead of everyone. I opened the drive on Adrian's laptop. Inside were 3 video files and a scanned PDF. The first video showed Margot and Charles in their living room, the timestamp just 3 days before Thanksgiving. The camera was positioned discreetly behind a set of books. I watched Margot hand Charles a small glass vial and say, "It's just a sleep aid. Barely a full dose. She won't know the difference, but she'll miss the opening." Charles hesitated. "What if she doesn't drink it?" Margot smiled. "Then maybe it finds its way into her bag, or her coat pocket. Just enough doubt." I felt my chest tighten. I had never seen Margot so open, so clinical. There was no emotion in her voice, no guilt, just logistics. The second video was from the morning after Thanksgiving. Margot on the phone with someone I didn't recognize. "He drank the wrong glass," she said sharply. "It wasn't supposed to go that way, but no one knows. I'll spin it. Grace is already halfway to self-blame. She always is." I paused the video. Adrian sat beside me, silent. The third video was different. It was from 2 years ago. Vanessa, alone in her car, filming herself. The angle was shaky, the audio low. "They tried to do it to me too," she said. Margot said I was too reactive, that I wasn't Eli's future. She started planting things, emails, hints, texts she said she'd accidentally seen. It took me a year to realize it wasn't me unraveling, it was them trying to pull the thread. I sat still, the weight of it anchoring me to the chair. The PDF was a scanned letter. Vanessa had written it the year she stopped attending Ashby family dinners. She never sent it, but Adrian had asked for it months ago. It was dated, signed, and filled with paragraphs describing Margot's precise manipulation, how she used Ray's miscarriage to imply instability, how she spread rumors quietly through concerned comments, how she made sure every woman who came too close to her sons felt just a little less than. I closed the folder and exhaled. "Why haven't you shown this to Eli?" Adrian shook his head. "He's not ready. Ray tried. He chose to believe his mother." "And what are we supposed to do?" I asked. "Wait until Margot poisons someone else's reputation? until she decides I'm not just a mistake, but a threat? Adrian's voice was calm. We do it carefully. We don't scream. We don't storm in. We document. We control the narrative. For once. That was when I understood. This wasn't spite. This wasn't obsession. This was silent revenge. Not the kind where you slash tires or throw wine in someone's face. The kind where you build your case like a quiet prosecutor. The kind where you let the evidence speak louder than any accusation ever could. Margot had spent years crafting her image as the polished matriarch, the family keeper, the woman who throws perfect dinners and gives perfectly timed compliments that sting only after you've smiled. But Adrian had learned her language, and he had learned how to write his own version of the story. Later that night, I stared at the ceiling and realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. Part of me had always doubted what I saw, not because I didn't believe Margot capable of manipulation, but because she had convinced me I was too emotional, too sensitive, too quick to take things personally. And now I had footage. Now I had a partner who wasn't just standing by me, but standing in front of me, shielding me in silence until I was strong enough to face it myself. We didn't talk strategy that night. We didn't need to, because when someone tries to poison your peace, you don't react, you record. You don't confront, you prepare. And when the time comes, you let them pour their own glass, unaware they've already swallowed the truth. I stared at the lab printout until the words stopped making sense. Trace amounts of zolpidem, a class of sedatives, stronger than I ever expected, strong enough to disorient someone mid-meal. Charles's name was scribbled on the top in Adrian's handwriting, dated the morning after that awful dinner. Just to be safe, he had said, sliding the folded sheet into my palm when I found him pacing the back porch. I had asked him why he didn't tell me sooner. He didn't answer. He just looked at me with a strange mix of shame and protection, like a man who'd seen the full picture but didn't want his wife to carry it all. I sat down beside him on the porch swing, feeling the cold metal frame bite into my legs. Why would she do that? My voice cracked before I could control it. Adrian rubbed his hands together like he was washing them of something. I think she was trying to embarrass you, maybe just enough to make you look unstable, not enough to seriously hurt you, just enough to derail you. That was when I turned to him, tears threatening, and asked, "And you thought she was capable of that before the test?" His silence was answer enough. I got up slowly and went back inside. The swing creaked behind me, then fell silent. My doubt had hurt him, but his silence had hurt me more. Margot's lies were growing roots in places I hadn't even realized were vulnerable. That night, I lay in bed with my back to Adrian. He didn't touch me. He didn't try to explain. We both just listened to the ceiling fan spin out our exhaustion, our fear, our disbelief. Marriage isn't just about trust. It's about who you believe when things get blurry. And somewhere in the quiet, I had started to wonder if I was the only one who still wanted to see clearly. The next day, I opened my flower shop 15 minutes late. I couldn't find my keys. I couldn't find my rhythm. I stood behind the counter, staring at a stack of sympathy arrangements that hadn't been picked up, wondering how many ways one woman could be made invisible in her own life. Ray showed up just after 10, holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing her "don't even try to lie to me" face. "You look like hell," she said without sugar. "Thanks." She handed me the coffee. "Margot came by my house." That jolted me upright. "What?" She dropped off a little gift basket, fig jam, oat crackers, lavender soap, like I'm the Queen of England or something. "Why?" Ray pulled out her phone and read the message from Margot. "Just thinking of you lately. You've always been such a steady friend to Grace. I hope the wedding work isn't wearing her down too much. She looked pale last week. Take care." My hand clenched so tightly around the cup I nearly cracked the lid. She's building a case, to anyone who'll listen. "She's rewriting the story," Ray nodded, "and trying to get ahead of whatever she thinks you're going to say." I walked into the back room and sat on the wooden bench where we arranged sprays. I feel like she's poisoning everything, not just me, the space around me. Ray followed, sitting across from me. "You think you're losing Adrian?" I didn't answer. She leaned in, gentler now. Then fight for him. But not like her. No games, no tactics, just truth. It was the simplest thing, and the hardest. That evening, I waited until Adrian got home from work, set his briefcase down, and started unbuttoning his collar like he did every night. "Do you think I imagined it?" I asked. He stopped. "What?" That night. The switch. The way she looked at me. The way she deflects. The way she keeps trying to make me sound fragile. He didn't move for a moment. Then, "No, I don't." I looked at him fully. "Then why did you wait to show me the report?" He sighed, sitting down slowly on the edge of the couch. "Because I didn't know what it would do to you, what it would do to us. And now?" "I still don't," he admitted. "But I know pretending it didn't happen makes it worse." For the first time in weeks, I felt something begin to repair. Not fully, but enough to hold on to. We sat together in the fading light of our living room, both unsure of the next step, but finally, united in the understanding that Margot's lies were no longer hers alone to spin. The next morning, Adrian called his father. "I want to talk," I heard him say from the hallway. "Just you and me, no Mom." He nodded into the phone, listened, then added, "I think there's some stuff we need to clear up. For everyone's sake." After he hung up, I asked, "Is he coming?" He said he'll meet us at the park near the lake, noon tomorrow. "Us?" Adrian looked at me with the kind of certainty I hadn't seen in weeks. "Yes, us." As I turned away, the smallest breath of relief moved through my chest. Margot had underestimated me for the last time, and now her own husband was about to hear the truth, from both of us. Peter had never once said my name, not even when I became his daughter-in-law, not once in 6 years. But today, I watched him walk toward me like he'd run out of ways to pretend I wasn't there. He stopped in front of the lake bench where I sat alone, the crumpled test strip still tucked inside my coat pocket like a broken truth. I did not offer him a smile. I did not shift to make space. I simply looked ahead, watching the wind ripple the surface of the water like it was carrying the tension between us. He sat down anyway, his knees slow, hands on his thighs like he was still measuring how much weight he was allowed to carry in my presence. We sat in silence for nearly a full minute, not because we had nothing to say, but because, for the first time in years, Peter Trent had no script, no remark about how women should be polite, no critique of my cooking or my posture or how I shouldn't have worn red lipstick to church. Just breathing, just wind, just silence. Finally, he exhaled, not like he was releasing judgment, but like he was bracing himself. "She's not well," he said. His voice was quieter than I'd expected. "Margot's been spiraling. I tried to tell her to stop." I didn't speak, because I knew what he wanted. He wanted me to say thank you, for a warning that never came, for a seat at the table that never existed, for a life where I was made to feel smaller just so their son could appear bigger. "I thought it would pass," he continued. "I told myself it's just the change, or stress, or grief from her mother dying, but that was 5 years ago." I blinked slowly, still not looking at him. "She poisoned me, Peter." "I know." 2 words, that was it, but they landed with more force than a scream, because it meant he had seen it coming and still done nothing. "I saw the bottle," he said, "in the garage cabinet. I recognized the label. I confronted her that night. She said it was for pests, for the garden. I didn't believe her." "Then why did you let me eat at her table?" His voice cracked. "Because I didn't know if she'd actually use it." "She almost did." He nodded, not slowly, not with resignation, but like a man who'd already replayed every possible scenario and still ended up ashamed. "She's my wife, Grace. And I'm your son's wife, and your granddaughter's mother." The silence between us filled with every Sunday lunch, every Christmas brunch, every scraped plate I'd taken to the sink, while Margot smiled at him like she ruled the kingdom and I just passed through the gates. He lowered his head into his hands. "You're right." I turned to face him then. "What are you going to do?" He didn't answer. But his hands were trembling now, fingers pressing into his forehead like he could push the guilt deeper into his skull and make it disappear. "She's getting help," he said. "I called her sister. I called her doctor. She screamed at me, Grace, said I was choosing you over her. I told her—" "What?" He lifted his head. "What did you tell her, Peter?" He paused, looked straight at me for the first time in his life. "I told her I believe you." The words didn't come with apology or justification. They came as they were, unwrapped, exposed, soft with the kind of weight that doesn't beg to be forgiven, but quietly admits it's time to stop pretending. I didn't cry. I didn't thank him. I didn't hug him like some movie ending. I just stood, let the lake breeze touch my cheeks, and for the first time in years, I felt taller than the shame they tried to wrap around me. As I walked away, I didn't look back, but I did hear him call my name. Grace. Only once, but it was enough. I did not pack a suitcase, I didn't grab a scarf or check the weather or even leave a note. I walked into that house one final time, slipped my arms into Lily's backpack straps, and walked out holding her hand. We left behind the ceramic vase Margot had gifted us last Christmas, the tea towels embroidered with her name, and the brittle silence that had hardened between every wall. There was no explosion, no goodbye, just the quiet of a door clicking shut and the sound of our shoes on the driveway gravel. Elliot didn't protest. He had spent the last 2 days tiptoeing between loyalty and guilt, but when he saw me step through the threshold, his eyes softened, not in apology, but in quiet permission. He nodded once. I nodded back, and Lily climbed into her booster seat like we were just heading to the grocery store, but I knew we weren't coming back. That evening, we checked into a modest hotel about 6 miles from Lily's school. It had a pool with too much chlorine, a vending machine that ate my quarters, and a microwave that blinked the wrong time. But it was safe, it was quiet, and I could breathe. For the first time in 6 years, I could breathe without fear of Margot's voice calling my name in that sharp, sugary way that made even compliments feel like punishment. Lily fell asleep fast, her little hand tucked under her cheek, her dinosaur pajamas wrinkled at the elbow. I sat beside her on the bed, watching the glow of the cartoon nightlight reflect off her curls. And then I opened my laptop. Not to scroll, not to escape, but to begin writing it all down. Everything. The glass switch, the taste, the blood tests, the pills, the way Margot watched me that night from across the table, how she tilted her wine glass and smiled like a queen inspecting her kingdom. I wrote every detail with surgical clarity because I needed a record. Not for court, not for revenge. For myself, to remind myself I had not imagined any of it. And in the middle of my 3rd paragraph, Elliot called. I stared at the phone for a while, then picked up. "I saw your car wasn't in the driveway," he said quietly. "I needed space." "Is Lily okay?" "She's asleep." A pause, then softer. "Are you okay?" "No," I said. Another silence. This one longer. He didn't try to fill it. Maybe he finally understood that his silence, his looking away, had been part of the harm. "I talked to Dad," he said. "He told me what happened at the lake." I stayed quiet. He said, "He's sorry." "He said it to me," I replied, "not to you." "I know." There was a rustle, like he was pacing. Then, "I'm not going to ask you to come back." "Good," I said, "but I do want to see Lily. I want to keep showing up, even if I never fix it." "You can pick her up tomorrow after school, but not from the house. I'll text you the address." "Okay." He paused again. "Grace?" "What?" "I never protected you from her. I thought if I just kept the peace, things would calm down. But they didn't. I was wrong." There was no defense in his voice, no begging, no promises of therapy or declarations of love, just a man standing in the ashes of the life he'd watched burn down from the front porch. "I need to go," I said. "Okay." I hung up, closed the laptop, and curled up next to Lily, letting her steady breathing remind me that peace doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. The next morning, I woke up early and took Lily to school. Her little voice hummed Taylor Swift songs as we waited at the stoplight, and when I kissed her goodbye, she clutched my hand with that instinct children have, like they know when something has shifted forever, even if they can't name it. After she disappeared into the building, I didn't drive away right away. I just sat there and let the quiet fill me, until a text came through, from Peter. I made a decision. Just that. 5 words. No punctuation, no explanation. But somehow I knew. He had chosen. It was late afternoon when Peter knocked on the hotel room door. I had texted him the room number hours earlier without expecting he'd come, but he did, alone, quiet, and holding something in his hand. Not flowers, not a gift bag, just a simple manila envelope with my name written in all caps across the front. Lily was still at school. I had the afternoon to myself, though myself felt like a stranger I was only just meeting again. He stepped inside without speaking, closed the door behind him, and sat across from me at the small round table between the twin beds. "She's been doing it for years," he said. I waited. Small doses. It was how she kept him, my father, tethered to her emotionally. When he started getting ideas, started drifting, she'd dose his drinks with prescription sleep aids. Not enough to kill him, just enough to make him tired, slow, forgetful. He looked up, face pale. "I found the pills after she visited 2 weeks ago. He asked me to help him find his car keys, and instead, I found 2 bottles labeled with different names, neither of them his." "Did he know?" Peter shook his head. "Number he thought she was helping him sleep." I swallowed. "And me?" He finally slid the envelope across the table. "You'll want to read it yourself. It's everything I gathered since that night. Receipts, timestamps, the wine label, surveillance footage from our home camera. Elliot already saw it. He confirmed it was the same bottle she brought for dinner." I opened it slowly, my fingers trembling. The papers were crisp, neatly labeled. At the top, a printed receipt from a boutique pharmacy in Fort Greene, dated 3 days before the dinner. Then came the video stills, Margot holding the wine bottle at the front door, then again while pouring it into glasses. Everything aligned. Peter didn't speak as I skimmed. He gave me space. When I looked up again, my voice barely came out. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because Elliot's struggling, and because I couldn't keep watching her hurt everyone around her, but mostly because you have a daughter, and you deserve to know who's been sitting across the table from your child." I blinked. Hard. "Does Elliot know you're here?" "He does." "And your father?" "I told him this morning. He said he needed some time." We sat in silence. The hum of the AC unit filled the room like white noise in a waiting room, neither of us knowing what we were waiting for. "I need to file a formal report," I said finally. "You should. Will you support it?" He nodded. "Yes." "What about Elliot?" Peter looked down. "That's his choice. But I think he's ready to stand on the right side of this." The weight of it all pressed against my ribs, this quiet avalanche of truth, loyalty, and pain that had been building for years behind every polite smile at dinner tables and every shrug of, "That's just how she is." I didn't cry, I didn't yell, I just picked up my phone and called my lawyer. Later that evening, Elliot came by. Not to the hotel, but to the park near Lily's school, where we agreed to meet so she wouldn't sense the tension. He watched her from a distance for a few minutes as she played in the sandbox, giggling with a new friend. Then he turned to me. "I saw the footage," he said quietly. I waited. I should have seen this years ago, the way she manipulates, the way she gets inside people's heads. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to defend. I told her she's not welcome around Lily anymore, or around me. And what did she say? She cried, said I was ungrateful, said I'd regret this. "Do you?" He looked at me, his eyes clearer than they had been in months. "No." For the first time in weeks, something in me loosened, not forgiveness, not yet. But the grip of helplessness began to ease. "I'm moving into a place 2 streets over," he said. "I want to co-parent. On your terms." "And what are you doing about her?" I asked. He exhaled. I'm testifying. Whatever you need, I'll back you. Those words didn't solve everything, but they shifted the ground beneath our feet just enough. As the sun dipped lower, Lily ran up with her hands covered in sand and her cheeks flushed pink. "Daddy, push me on the swing?" He looked at me. I nodded. He followed her to the swing set, and I watched them, father and daughter, a moment untouched by the damage of the adults surrounding them. But as I stood there, a soft wind rustling the leaves overhead, I knew the storm hadn't passed. It had only just begun. 2 days after Elliot told her she was no longer welcome, Margot sent a dinner invitation. Not an apology, not a letter of remorse, just an ivory card slipped through my apartment mail slot, embossed with silver foil and her signature curlicue handwriting. "Sunday dinner, 6 p.m., the family needs healing." I read it twice. Then again. There was no return address, no RSVP instructions. Just that sentence, written with the same entitlement she used to wield in every room. I left it on the counter until Lily got home from school. She spotted it, asked if it was a birthday party, and I told her no, it was a mistake. But something about the invitation gnawed at me. Not because I wanted to go, I didn't. I had no intention of walking into another setup, another performance where she played gracious hostess, and I was cast as the villain in her rewriting of the truth. But because I knew she wanted me to refuse, and I had stopped giving her what she wanted. So on Sunday I dressed in quiet armor, a charcoal gray shift dress, hair pinned back, no makeup except for lipstick the color of dried cranberry. I asked Peter to take Lily for the night. I needed the space and the silence. At 6:04 p.m. I walked up the familiar stone steps of her brownstone and rang the bell. No one answered, so I pushed the door open. It was unlocked. Inside, the dining room was already set. 8 places, polished silver, crystal water goblets, linen napkins folded into swans. A roast sat untouched on the counter. The smell of rosemary and garlic clung to the air like a memory. And there she was, Margot, standing by the head of the table, in a navy dress, pearls at her throat, holding a glass of what I recognized immediately. The same wine. She raised it slightly when she saw me. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wasn't either," I replied calmly. She smiled, a tight, practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We've all said things we regret," she began, "and I think, as women, we sometimes let emotion get the better of us." I tilted my head. "Is that what happened? Emotion?" She sipped. "Of course. You misinterpreted a moment, a glass of wine, a bad reaction. These things happen." There it was. The rewriting had begun. I walked to the table and sat down without asking permission. I spoke with Elliot and Peter. Her hand paused halfway to her mouth. "I saw the footage. I have your pharmacy receipt and the wine label traced to that same purchase." Margot didn't flinch. Her performance was too seasoned. "I was helping you sleep, dear. You've looked tired for months." I let the silence stretch. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out my copy of the petition for a restraining order. I didn't hand it to her. I just placed it in front of me like a chess piece. She laughed softly. "You wouldn't. Think about what this would do to your husband, your daughter, your reputation." I met her gaze squarely. "This isn't about them. This is about what you put in my body, and what I will no longer allow near hers." She circled the table slowly, the click of her heels echoing. "You've always been dramatic." I didn't blink. "You want a war, but I've already won," she said, voice silk and venom. "You'll never truly belong in this family, no matter what paper you file." I stood. "That's where you're wrong," I said quietly. "I belong exactly where I choose to build something. And I'm not here for war. I'm here for clarity." And then I did what she never expected. I pulled out the matching wine bottle I had purchased days ago, same year, same label, and placed it gently on the table beside her glass. "Take this one. Have it tested. Compare it to what you brought. I already have. The chemical traces don't lie, but it's your choice, Margot. You can keep calling it a misunderstanding, or you can start realizing what's slipping out of your control." She stared at the bottle like it had grown teeth. "You're bluffing." "I'm already testifying, and Elliot's statement will be submitted tomorrow." Her hands trembled slightly as she placed her wine glass down. "Why now?" she asked. "Because Lily asked me yesterday if you were mad at her." That stopped her. "She's 6, I said softly, "and she thought your silence meant she did something wrong. That's how it begins, doesn't it? You twist the meaning, make people doubt themselves." Margot's shoulders dropped for the first time, not in humility, in calculation. She knew she couldn't win, not this time. I turned and walked out. No shouting, no theatrics, just the door closing gently behind me. As I stepped into the evening air, I felt no triumph, only relief. The confrontation wasn't about punishing her. It was about reclaiming my voice, the one she'd tried to quiet with half a glass of poison. And that voice was finally steady. It took 2 weeks for the paperwork to finalize. The restraining order, while not criminal, was clear. Margot was to have no unsupervised contact with me or Lily, no texts, no visits, no clever backdoor attempts through church, school, or mutual acquaintances. Peter never questioned my decision. He saw what she had done, and perhaps for the first time, he saw me. Not the role I played, but the person who had held this family together through grace, despite being torn down from the inside. Still, healing didn't arrive in thunderclaps. It came in small, quiet moments. The morning I poured coffee without checking over my shoulder. The night I tucked Lily into bed and didn't have to answer, "Why doesn't Grandma love me anymore?" It came when Peter cleared out the second guest room, Margot's old room, and turned it into my studio, with a new desk, soft white curtains, and the first painting easel I'd owned in 10 years. "You stopped creating," he said simply, "because you were surviving. Maybe now you can live again." The studio smelled like cedar and paint thinner, but to me it smelled like air. At work, my colleagues noticed the shift too. I was no longer flinching at every correction or volunteering for extra assignments to prove I was enough. I was quiet, focused, capable. I had forgotten what it felt like to trust myself, until the day a letter arrived. No signature, no return address, just one sentence in perfect cursive on plain stationery. "I underestimated you." It wasn't a confession. It wasn't even remorse. But I folded it once, slid it into a folder labeled "Done," and filed it away. That was her ending. Mine was still being written. A month later, I attended the school's spring parent brunch. It was just Lily and me. Peter had a work retreat, and I didn't mind. The morning was sunny, the tables filled with daffodils, and Lily had drawn a picture of our family with 3 smiling stick figures holding hands. The teacher leaned in. "She talks about you a lot," she said. "She says her mom is really brave." I didn't know what to say, just smiled. Brave wasn't a word I would have used. Not then, maybe not even now, but I had stayed steady in the storm, and maybe that was enough. As we were leaving, someone from across the parking lot called my name. I turned to see Elliot, Peter's brother. He hadn't spoken to me since the night I showed him the wine bottle. He walked up slowly. "I didn't know how to reach out," he said, "but I wanted you to know. I moved her into a retirement community." My face must have registered shock because he quickly added, "It wasn't punishment. She needs supervision and distance." I nodded. "She still blames you," he said, eyes lowered. "But I don't." He handed me a small box. Inside was the matching set of crystal wine glasses Margot used for holidays, heirlooms passed down 3 generations. "I think you deserve to choose what happens to them now." I closed the box gently. Not everything needed to be kept, but not everything needed to be destroyed either. That afternoon, I placed the glasses in the very back of the hallway cabinet, behind the photo albums and unused linens, not in anger, just in memory. That's the thing about revenge. The loud kind, the kind people write movies about, it burns hot and fast. But the quiet kind, the silent revenge, it's the soft decision to live better, to walk into the next room without fear, to let your daughter see you protect without shouting, rebuild without begging, and choose peace when chaos was easier. A month passed, then 3. Then one morning I sat down at my new desk, stared out the window at Lily riding her scooter in the driveway, and realized I was no longer waiting for the next storm. It had already come and gone, and I was still standing. What stays with me is not the revenge, but the silence she chose instead. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like walking away, without ever turning back. If you saw yourself in this story, hit subscribe to keep hearing kindness echo after heartbreak, from Revenge with Seren.